Welcome to my channel. I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today we're gonna talk about this small but excellent lens, the Olympus 45mm f1.8. Before we continue with this video, this is just a quick reminder for you to support my channel by liking this video, sharing this video, and subscribing to my channel down below. Thank you, and let's continue with the video. So today, I want to talk about this lens, the Olympus 45mm f1.8. Well, it's no secret, by now if you're following my channel, you know that I like small lenses that performs wonderfully well for both photography and video. Well, this lens is no exception. The Olympus 45mm f1.8 is a small lens that's designed to cover medium telephoto focal length, which is very useful for portrait and close-up photography and video. This lens has a focal length that is equivalent to 90mm in full frame, which is very close to the classic 85mm that you'll find on so many other systems with the same purpose. One thing that I noticed about this lens is that this lens is underrated in my opinion, because not so many people talk about this lens, and that is why I want to share my experience using this lens in this video. Well, I have to be honest with you guys, I don't do a lot of portrait or close-up photography or video. But when I really need to do it, the 45mm is the first lens that I reach out to. It is such a small and lightweight little lens, so that I'm more likely to bring this lens for those just-in-case moments. And every time I had a chance to use this lens, I always enjoy using this lens because I know in the end that the result that this lens will deliver will always be fantastic. So far, I've used this 45mm lens for portrait, product photography, as well as some close-up shots. And as you can see with the sample pictures that I put on this video, the lens performed wonderfully. Not only the image quality that this lens produces is sharp and pleasing, there's also a specific kind of look that this lens can create. Maybe it's the rendering, maybe it's the depth because of the large aperture. I cannot really quite explain it, but it's very pleasing to look at, and I really love it. I love it. Now let's quickly talk about the specification and the performance of this lens. First, as I already mentioned before, this is one of a few Micro Four Thirds lenses that has 4 of the most attractive features. If you saw any of my earlier Micro Four Thirds lenses videos, you might already been hearing this a lot, but let me say it again. This lens is small, sharp, lightweight, and has large aperture. Those are 4 very important features that if they are present in a single lens, it will make that lens to become very desirable. Wow! The size of this lens is quite small, so it allows you to carry this lens very easily, even inside your pocket. And it will encourage you to bring it out even more, to take more pictures and more videos. Now, speaking of image quality, this lens is one of the sharpest Micro Four Thirds lenses available on its price range. Now, you don't have to worry about getting the right aperture when using this lens, because it is sharp all the way from f1.8 to f11. However, if you really want to become very nitpicky, then maximum sharpness can be achieved at about f4 or f5.6. But even then, even at its largest aperture at f1.8, it is still very sharp. Furthermore, the image quality provided by this lens has a very good contrast. It renders the shadow and highlight very beautifully. The best thing about this lens is that you don't have to stop down your aperture to get the best contrast possible. Also, there's no chromatic aberration present when using this lens, so it's very incredible. And also, there's no vignetting present at any aperture when using this lens. So what's not to like about this lens? Now, speaking about specification of this lens has a large aperture of f1.8. While f1.8 is not monstrously large like f1.2 or f0.95, it is still considered to be a pretty large aperture. The combination of a mid-telephoto focal length of 45mm with a large aperture of f1.8 will inevitably make this lens good for creating bokeh. And while the bokeh rendering is not perfect, it's definitely good enough for my needs. So overall, I'm very happy with the image quality that this lens can produce. Now let's briefly talk about the performance of this lens. First, let's talk about autofocus. The autofocus performance of this lens is very good, snappy and fast enough for most of my needs. The autofocus is silent, so you can definitely use it for video, and it's also using internal system, so there's no rotating front element of the lens whatsoever. Also, the lens is very minimalist. There's no like fancy switches whatsoever on the lens. So the lens is very straightforward to use. Just attach it to your camera body and use your camera body to control any settings that you need from the lens. There are only a few things that you can physically do with this lens. One is to attach filters to its 37mm filter thread on the front of the lens, and two is to remove the bayonet cover on this lens so that you can attach accessories such as lens hood. So as you can already tell, I'm quite happy with the performance and the result that the 45mm lens can deliver. Coupled with the fact that the lens is quite affordable at about $300, this is such an excellent lens. Although it might sound that this lens is flawless, there are actually some negatives that I must address in this video. First, although the autofocus performance of this lens is quite fast and snappy, the close focusing distance, however, is not close enough for some of my needs. I cannot really get close enough, especially for small objects when taking picture or video using this lens, and that sometimes can become a problem for me. This happens quite frequently when I'm photographing flowers or small products like small toys or similar objects. Next negative point is the filter thread size. 37mm is not a common filter size such as for ND or polarizer, so you almost always want to have a step-up ring so that you can adapt more common filter sizes to this lens. Bringing a step-up ring doesn't sound too bad, but it's actually an extra item and it increases the risk of things going wrong, especially when you forget to bring it during a serious photography or video work. Last negative point is the focal length itself. 45mm in micro four thirds or about 90mm in full frame is quite a specialized focal length that I don't use quite frequently. For run and gun situation, the focal length is actually quite limiting, especially if you have to shoot something very large, and if you have to fit the entire object into your frame, then you have to step back very far, which is quite inconvenient. However, after I'm using this lens for quite a while and familiarizing myself with the focal length, I now have a good grasp about what works and what doesn't work with this lens. Okay, so before I end this video, there are just a few more things that I want to share with you as a key takeaway points from discussing this lens with you. The first main point that I want to emphasize with you with the Olympus 45mm is that you don't have to spend a lot of money to get great result. I'm a firm believer of minimalism in photography, using minimal camera gear to achieve great result. Sometimes we will think that the more expensive the gear is, the better the result will be. Well, that might be true, but oftentimes it will cause us to spend a lot of money unnecessarily to justify purchasing for a new camera gear. Now, this lens at about $300 will give you great result without spending too much money. Now sure, this lens is not an f0.95 or f1.2 lens, but if you know how to work around the limitation of this lens, f1.8 is more than good enough for most of your needs. Second takeaway point that I want to share is that the more portable and lightweight the gear is, the more you are encouraged to take it with you and use it. I'm surprised by how many times I'm reaching for this lens when I need a mid-telephoto focal length, because this lens is small, portable and lightweight. So it can be said that the size and the weight of your gear will definitely influence your gear choice. So that is all for today's video. If you enjoy watching this video, please don't forget to support my channel by liking this video, sharing this video and subscribing to my channel down below. Thank you and goodbye.